and our conversations drift into family and all sorts of things. But I want to especially commend him for his insight on putting something like this together. When he did that, I had an article that I sent to him about on leadership, and it was a research that had been done for 21,000 employees, and they found that only 20% of the employees felt as if their leaders had given them an opportunity to grow in their position. And so there was this great void in corporations today for both leadership development and encouragement. And only 20% of the 80% of the employees say, "Hey, the leader doesn't care about me. They don't encourage me. I don't have any opportunity to grow my position." And so I just thought it was really incredible that you're doing this, and I really commend Phil for his vision and making this opportunity available to you. I saw that there's a display for Dallas Christian College in the back here, and when you get a couple guys like David and I who have backgrounds in higher education, I've been working with colleges since I was 17. I've never graduated. I keep going. And so whether it was campus ministry or Milligan or Dallas or Hope International or whatever it is, I've always been involved in higher education. And so I strongly believe in the importance of that, and really would reinforce what he said about the value of continuing your education in some way. And Dallas has some great online programs in ministry that you may find helpful. So I'd encourage you to check those out as well. Since in the last 3 years, since I've retired, I've been working with the Association for Biblical Higher Education, and that's the organization that accredits Bible colleges. And they're based out of Orlando, Florida, and there's about 175 Bible colleges in the United States with about 65,000 students enrolled in those schools. And so a few years ago, they approached myself and the former president of Indiana Wesleyan, former president from Asbury University Seminary, and a couple other guys, and asked us if we would put together a program for excellence in board governance. And so we started this coaching process, and over the last 3 years, we have coached 30 Bible colleges across the country. And what we've learned is that a lot of trustees do not understand what their job is. And our Bible colleges, many of them are struggling today. And within the Christian church restoration movement, we've seen several of them have to actually close. And that's sad. It's almost like a grief process. I remember when, and I have had countless conversations with other college presidents and leaders over the years. About 15 years ago, I wrote an article in the Christian Standard that said, if we do not get past our own narrow-minded competitiveness, we're going to become the victims of it as well. And we have to learn how to collaborate and cooperate. And we haven't done a very good job. Our colleges are too independent-minded. And as a result, many of them just don't work together. And consequently, some of them have closed. I watched Puget Sound Christian College close. I watched Crossroads College, used to be Minnesota Bible College, closed, St. Louis Christian College, Cincinnati Christian University, and when those happened, it just really was a grief process for me, because I thought, man, we're losing these schools and they're struggling financially. There's just a whole list of reasons why that's happening, and I've written some stuff about that. But anyway, I really would encourage you to consider opportunities that you have to grow and to advance in your leadership development. Many of our colleges are very reasonably priced. I'm doing an accreditation visit for Dallas Baptist University next month, and believe me, it's not cheap to go to DBU at all. So it may seem expensive to you, but the cost point for our schools is much more reasonable. So as we go through these things today, I want you to do a couple things and be thinking about this. We're going to be talking about hopefully, if I can advance this. It's not advancing yet. There we go. It really worked out well this morning that I ended up getting stuck in traffic. I felt like I was back in California sitting for an hour on the interstate over here up by Denton, because there was an accident and all the lanes were closed. traffic was just creeping along. So I texted Phil and I said, hey, I think I'm not going to make it. And I left plenty early, but I spent an hour sitting over there. But it really worked out well. It's almost like God designed that traffic jam, because I think what David led off with this morning was perfect. That's the foundation. And it begins with talking about spiritual leaders. So in this book here by Henry Blackaby says, Christian leaders who know God and who know how to lead in a Christian manner will be phenomenally more effective in their world than even the most skilled and qualified leaders who lead without God. So that's the basic assumption that what we're going to be talking about today. So a lot of the concepts and principles here have come from the corporate world, and they're applied in any business or any organization that you might talk about. But I want us to realize that whatever I'm covering today is based on this foundation. You have to be a spiritual leader. And so this kind of goes along very well with what David was sharing with us. There are plenty of examples in the Bible of great leaders. They have, you can look at Moses, Joshua, Joseph, Nehemiah, David, Peter, Paul, all those great leaders in the Bible. And there are a couple things they all had in common. First, a relationship with God. And secondly, they all led God's people during a time of crisis, during very critical times. And I think that's often when our spiritual leadership is tested the most. It's not too hard to lead when everything's going great, when the attendance is up and the offering's up and everybody's happy. But boy, when a crisis hits, whether it's a pandemic or a blow up in the church or an issue with whatever it might be, that can be really a test of your leadership. And so this spiritual foundation is absolutely critical in moving forward. So all these slides, I'm going to pass them along to Andrew, and he can give it to you, and you can be able to see them. So don't worry about having to take notes on the slides here. But there is a handout on your paper, on your table, that we're going to get to in just a little bit. Leaders of growing churches. If you are familiar with Bob Russell, this is a book he wrote, When God Builds a Church. And Bob said, when I'm asked to analyze why our church has grown so dramatically, I say there is one overriding reason God has blessed our congregation: excellent leadership. The elders and staff have consistently been an example of what godly leadership is all about. So if you've followed Bob's career, you know that he's had a great success at Southeast and the things. And since he's retired, he's also invested himself in many working with pastors and elders and helping them to grow in their effectiveness. But so your question is, what is godly leadership? Well, he said, first of all, it's personal character. It's the kind of Christ-like example that you would find describing an elder in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus. That's what personal character is all about. It's not referring to perfection, but it's talking about leading with sincerity and serving with the right reason. It's just looking at your heart and saying, why am I doing this? And that's, in essence, a personal character. He also said it's about leadership capability. So the book talks about how there are a lot of very godly people in the church who are great individuals, but they're not cut out to be leaders. It's just not their spiritual gift. They may think they can, but sometimes we have to realize this person should not be in a position of leadership. So leadership capability is something you have to look for, not only in yourself, but in the people around you. These are people who are willing to face up to problems. They're not stubborn and closed-minded. They're willing to let other people do their job. They just invest themselves in the organization or in the church or in the ministry in such a way that it says, this person really reflects what godly leadership is all about. So that's what Bob says is a key to the growth of his church, and I'm confident will be the key to the growth of yours as well. So as we're talking about your self-leadership, I think the first thing you have to do is to know your leadership style. Now, this was based on a 3-year study of 3,000 leaders, and it was talking about leaders who get results. And there are different qualities or characteristics you can see, and there's a lot of definitions of leadership. So here are a few of them that you might say. Now, once again, I want to ask you to think about, does that describe me? And who do I know that's like that? What other leaders do I know of who may be, that might fall in that category? So the first one is coercive. And I was talking to Frank yesterday, and Frank's in here. He was in the military. Frank, where are you at? Yeah. What branch of the military were you in? Air Force. People in the military know what coercive leadership is all about. This is when the sergeant says, you're going to do this, and it's a command. It's demanding. They tell you what you're going to do, and you don't ask any questions. And you've all seen people who are leaders like that. They operate from that basis. I'm the leader. I'm going to tell you what to do. Don't ask any questions. Then you got the authoritative leader, who is the individual who says, I know a lot about this subject. I'm an expert. And so you may be sitting around the table with individuals who are all leaders in some fashion, but there's one person there who's got a great background in, let's say, marketing, or they may have a great information about construction. And so when they say, this is the way we should do this project, nobody else asks any questions because they're not the expert. They're not an authority on that subject. And so sometimes you operate from a position of authority where you say, look, when we're having this discussion about this doctrinal issue, I think I've studied this more than anybody else. And so this is how I see it. And people defer to your opinion or your views because of your expertise on that topic. There are affiliative leaders who are persons who put people first. They like to build consensus. They want to create a culture of bonding and getting people together, and just they really like harmony. You know, they really get upset when everybody's just disgruntled or mad about something. They just really want to create this environment where let's just all get along with each other. Let's don't argue with one another. And their skill is bringing that peaceful spirit into your organization. Then there are those who are the democratic leader. That's the person who says, okay, let's vote on this. Everybody has a voice in here. I'm going to try to be the one that kind of builds opinions and draws it out and what you think so we can get on the same page. And we like democratic leaders because they ask for our thoughts or our input. There's a pace setter leader. This is someone who is very task oriented, very vision driven, they push forward all the time. Let's get these things done. Let's quit talking about this and let's do something. They're active. They don't want to just sit back and we've analyzed this thing to death. We need to make a decision. And I remember working with one group. I said, just make a decision. They kept talking and talking and talking about it. And you'd get really frustrated. And everybody around the table was getting frustrated because the leader at that group wasn't capable of saying, here's the decision we're going to make. And then there's the coaching leader. And this is the person who is good at mentoring and developing others. They're kind of transformational, bringing out the best in people around us. Now, all of these are different. And we probably somewhat have a tendency to lean more toward one than another. But you need to realize that you're somewhat eclectic in the way that you are leading, because sometimes you have to lead from different positions or different styles. So it's not like just one style is going to suit you for all your career or all your ministry or every situation. You become selective in saying, okay, I can see that I've got to tell this person, you've got to do that because I'm in charge. And there reaches a point where you almost have to be coercive and say, you know, this is not an option for you. This is something you have to be doing here. There are other times when your expertise gives you the opportunity to lead in an organization. So wherever style you're coming from, it's important to know what they are. So you ask yourself, what's my leadership style? Here we go. Then the next question you're going to ask yourself is, what are my leadership skills? Leadership skills there's a whole lot of these available. You might be able to look at this and say, okay, what's my strength and my ability here? Let's take, for example, strategic planning. This is one of those areas that I have spent a lot of time in. I used to teach the senior level course in the College of Business at Hope, and it was a capstone course on strategic management. And so I would have the students in that course develop strategic plans for the university and for a corporation, because I believe in the value of planning. I always thought, the proverb that says a man's mind plans his ways, but God directs his steps, was saying to us, God gave you a brain for a reason. And some people can be very good at putting together a strategic plan. They're able to develop the vision statement. They can do the SWOT analysis. They're able to look at their organization and say, okay, here are our strengths. Here are our weaknesses. What are the opportunities? What are the threats? They go through this process, and we sit back and say, well, I'm glad we have this person on our team. They think strategically. Others, your skill may be time management and setting priorities. Somebody else would say, my strength is in the fiscal area. I can manage resources well in fundraising or budgeting. Could be human resources where it comes to hiring individuals. And, there's a talent to that. There's a skill to being able to hire the right people. And when you look for the character and the competency and the team building, the cohesiveness with your team, you're looking for the right person to put in there. Others are good at communication. They can write something and just expresses the position of your organization or your church in such a way that says, well, that's exactly what we were all thinking. They're great on social media. They might be able to speak quite well in a community or in the church, something like that. That's a skill of leadership. There's decision-making skills, being able to do conflict resolution. Delegating to others is a leadership skill, knowing when to say, okay, this is the person that should do this job in our organization here. So remember, no one does it all. But when you're in a really large church, you can hire specialists to do these things. But when you're a startup and you're on your own, sometimes you have to do almost all of those. And it can be a bit overwhelming when you're doing the communication and you're doing the hiring and you're managing the budget and you're doing the strategic planning. And that's why it's great to have organizations like Nexus that come alongside you to help you do some of those things until you're able to grow your church to the point where you can say, okay, we can take on that part ourselves. So a lot of these things that you'll see here are what you see happening in Nexus, for everything from the strategic planning to the communication and marketing and things. If you don't know where your strengths lie, there's a little book, if you haven't done it before, called the Strengths Finder. And the Strengths Finder, you can buy the book, and then it gives you a little code in the back. And you go online and you do this little test, and it says, okay, here are your top 5 strengths. And when you do that, there's descriptions in the book that says, okay, this is what this strength does in a church or in a ministry. And so my 5 strengths are achiever, discipline, strategic, focus, and responsibility. So now that I know what those things are, I'm able to use them to help me in my leadership ministry. This book here is one that influenced me a long time ago as I began to think about leadership. And it's by Jim Collins, and it has he begins to talk about a level 5 leader. Now, the way this book was written was Jim Collins had graduate students do research, and they took a look at 1,435 Fortune 500 companies. Now, every year, Fortune magazine will say, here are the top 500 companies. So they went back for several years and picked out 1,435 of those companies that had made it to the Fortune 500. Then they said, now, which one of these companies has exceeded the market by at least 3 times the growth of the market during that time, which is pretty phenomenal, a company that exceeds the stock market. And not only have they done that, they've sustained it for 15 years. So they wanted a company that wasn't just flash in the pan, but one that consistently over time had excelled and beat the stock market by at least 3 times. And then they narrowed it down to 11 of the very best companies they could find. I said, now, what is it that these companies have in common? What was it that made them great companies? It's okay to be a good company, but why were they great companies? And they found, interesting enough, the number one factor was the leader. It was the leader. So that was the reason these companies had excelled, was because who they had at the head of the company, the CEO. There was no miracle moment. It was the consistent pursuit of their goals that helped them make that accomplishment. And he called it the flywheel principle. They just kept doing it and doing it and doing it until they picked up speed and momentum. And then all of a sudden, things kind of had this breakthrough moment, and they were really successful. So he found that these companies had disciplined people, they had disciplined thought, disciplined action, and they did these things. So here were some characteristics of these. Let me go ahead and list them all here. They were ambitious first and foremost for the company. They were fanatically driven, and they focused on sustaining results. They attributed success to others, but accepted responsibility for problems. They were understated and displayed compelling modesty, and they set their successors up for success. Now, out of these things that Collins looked at, he created what he called the 5 levels of leaders. There different levels are going through here. I don't know why the number 5 comes up so much, whether it's because we have 5 senses or 5 fingers on one hand, or whether it goes back to Walter Scott's 5-finger exercises. But we have, the 5 stages of grief and the 5 dysfunctions of a team, and there's 5 love languages Chapman has. There's 5 of everything. I think it's probably because the human brain always says, okay, I can remember 5 things, but don't give me 6. Well, on the table there with you, if you've got one of these, is this little handout where I'm going to go through Jim Collins's 5 levels of leadership. So you look at it, it's kind of like, it can be in a pyramid, but here's where we start at. Down at the bottom on that page there on the left-hand side, level 1 is a highly capable individual. This is someone who has the skill set that says, okay, they've got talent, they've got knowledge, they've got skill, they got good work habits. This is the kind of employee you want to hire. Everybody says, I want those people working for me. I want this individual with that kind of a makeup, that kind of personality, that kind of trends, that understands you can really do your job well. The next level up was a contributing team member. So this is when the leader begins to help their team succeed. They work effectively and productively and successfully with other people in the group. They've got some team building skills. They start finding themselves in a position where they can say, let's do this together. And they bring out the best in people. It's not just that they got great ability, they're able to look at the great ability of someone else and make sure it works. Next level up is a competent manager. They can organize a group of people effectively and efficiently to achieve their goals and objectives. And these kind of things you could find at someone, and it works in McDonald's. Okay, there's nothing sacred about this. McDonald's wants to hire some kid who says, okay, I can flip a hamburger and I know how to fix French fries and I can do it really well. And I can run the cash register. And if you ever drove through the drive-through, you see these kids that are making change and they're talking to somebody on the drive-through at the same time. They can multitask. Well, that's a highly capable person. Doesn't mean they're doing anything else. But every once in a while, they will spot a young person that's working at McDonald's or somewhere else. And they say, this person has a different attitude than most of the employees we're hiring. And the next thing you know, they're moving up and they become a competent manager. So I'm going to put you in charge of this shift. And you're going to be able to make sure everybody else is getting their job done. And you do it in such a way that they don't resent you. The next level up, Collins says, is the effective leader. This is when you develop a department organization that's achieved to achieve a compelling vision. And they found that this is where most top leaders are. But then there's a 5th level that they go to. And these were those companies that were the good to great companies. And they had a CEO or a leader who had all the things of the other 4 levels, plus the unique blend of personal humility and professional will that was required for true greatness. I think we want to aspire to be like that. We say it's not like anything bad about these other previous levels. They're all great. But many of us will say, I really want to aspire to be like that. I want to be able to take our organization, my ministry, my company, my church to that level. I don't want to be satisfied with my leadership ability to just stay there as a highly capable individual. I want to move up on these levels. And you don't abandon the previous level when you move to another one. You just build on that one. So that was how Collins approached this. Another leader then that I looked at was John Maxwell, and we've talked about him a little bit. And he talks about stages of influence. So in this one we have, let's see, you want to advance this, there you go. He says, influence doesn't come with a title. It is earned in the eyes of others as they develop respect and trust for you. People begin to listen when you're a person of influence. This is someone who takes a look at a situation from a different perspective. They're able to evaluate the best course of action. And when it comes time to delegate tasks, they know who to delegate it to. So I think you need to have a definition of leadership. If you've never taken the time to write down what you believe leadership is, I'd encourage you to say, this is what leadership means to me. And years ago, my definition of leadership was the ability to articulate a shared vision and influence others to achieve it. It didn't mean I was passing the buck. It also meant that I had to learn wherever I was serving, whether it was on a board or a corporation, a ministry, a mission group, or a college, whatever it was, we had to be able to articulate a compelling shared vision. And so I remember when they hired me at Hope International University, they had all the faculty there out there grilling me, and someone said, "What's your vision for the university?" And I was just doing it through the interview process. And I said, well, I don't think you want me to answer that yet. Because if you've got a leader that comes in and says, this is what we're going to do, that's that coercive kind of leader that just tries to manipulate and push everybody to accomplish their agenda. But you have to work with your people and say, what is our shared vision? And then one of the toughest things a leader has to do is, after they have consulted with the people they're working with to identify that shared vision, is to articulate it. And you'd be surprised how hard it is for you to articulate a compelling vision for your church. There are a lot of nice vision statements out there, and you almost could interchange them. I mean, you could steal one from one church and put it somewhere else. Same thing that happened to college. You can take one college mission statement for one Bible college and put it somewhere else, and it wouldn't make that much difference. So your mission statement is one thing, but articulating that compelling vision for the future that will motivate and challenge people, and then you're able to influence them to achieve it, that's a much more difficult process. So here's how Maxwell did his 5 levels. So let's go back to the right side of that sheet and see what he said happens. At the bottom level, this is where you are leading out of a position. It's pretty simple here, because this is saying, if you don't do what I say, I can fire you because I'm in a position to do so. And you may have worked for somebody like that before. And you know what it's like. It's a person who says, I'm the boss. And you don't want people to perceive you as the boss. But sometimes they do, because they're intimidated that you're the one that signs the paycheck. You're the one whose name is on the bottom line. You're the one that did the hiring or can do the firing. So some people lead from that position, and that's as far as they go. There's nothing wrong with it, because it's a reality. You can actually hire and fire people. That is your prerogative. But you don't want to just lead from that level. So you move up. The next level is your employees follow you because they want to. It's not because I have to. If I need a job, I'm following this person because we've made some connections. We've established a relationship, and we have some common ground. And so I'm beginning to have this relationship with this person that says, yeah, they can fire me if they want to, but that's not why I'm working here. That's not why I'm working with this person. I like this individual. We get along well together. Then you move up to the next level. It says this is where productivity begins to be important. And it's not measured by what you have accomplished, it's measured by what your team has accomplished. You know, you may be very successful as an individual, but when your team starts being successful, that's when you have risen to this third level. The fourth level is people development. And that's when a leader is followed and respected just in spite of his title, because he's proven his skills in coaching others. They know that he invests in them. He has good leadership abilities. He has a connection with their individuals. They just improve the performance of the team. And I have been so blessed wherever I've worked to be part of a great team. And I remember when I started at one institution, I was going through the interview process, and there was a person in the business office that when I remember the first time I met this individual, boy, this guy is a square peg in a round hole if I ever met one. Did not fit with the organization. And so I realized if I was hired by that school, that institution, that was going to be an issue we had to deal with. So this person was kind of toxic in the leadership team. He had a vice president position, and it didn't take me too long to figure out that if I didn't make a decision about this person, our team was never going to bond. And so his attitude was not, it was a cynical, critical, negative. It just brought everybody down. And you had to get rid of that. And so it was a tough call. He didn't like it. He told me, you can't fire me. I said, well, I'm afraid I can. So you're done. And you have to make those decisions. Henry Cloud's book called Necessary Endings is a very good one to read, because it's sometimes you do face situations where as you're developing people, there's persons you say, this isn't going to work out here. That's what Jim Collins calls getting the right people in the right seat on the bus. And some people just have to get off. And we call them blessed subtractions. So they go somewhere else, and maybe they thrive in that institution or something, but which is fine. But that's a tough call. But it's up to the leader to make that decision. And then finally, you have this top level here of personhood, where you reach a point in your leadership where your ultimate goal is to develop future leaders. So you invest yourself not just in making your team effective and growing your church, but in finding out who's this next person that I want to bring alongside who can someday step into this position. And I've had the privilege of doing that a few times, and it's really rewarding when you see that person step into that role and succeed. And you can feel like maybe God let me have a little piece or a little part of bringing this person along to where they are. And that's when you're a level 5 leader. You begin to say, okay, I'm going to make sure that someone carries on this institution, this organization, this church into the future. And so that's what succession planning is all about. And succession planning is just as much about investing in people as it is in putting together a nice plan that says, well, here's what happens if I get run over by a bus next week. That's who takes over. That's a succession plan, but it's not investing in the people that they're going to succeed you. So now we're going to talk about leadership soft skills. So what I did was I studied Maxwell, I studied Collins, and I said, you know what? I think there are 5 foundational soft skills that you can see in both of these guys, what they've written. So I've come up with my own soft skills of leadership. Leadership soft skills may be less obvious. It's not like strategic planning and budgeting and those kind of things and time management. But they can also have a much greater impact on your success as a leader. In other words, you may possess incredible leadership ability and the hard skills of management, but failing in one of these could keep you from being effective, or at a minimum, limit your results. So what are these 5 skills I came up with? Here's the first one. Integrity. That establishes trust. Patrick Lencioni's work called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team says the number one problem in organizations today is absence of trust. Well, integrity is about character. Character is essentially how God sees you. It's who you are when no one else is looking. Your reputation is important, but it is mainly a reflection of how you are perceived by others, and that can be deceiving. People may see us in a certain way, but that isn't necessarily what your character is all about. Character is essentially how God sees you. And people don't usually verbalize it if they don't trust you. If someone has actually gotten to the point that says, I don't trust you, then you got a problem. Usually they won't come out and say that. Something has happened that has damaged their trust relationship with you. It may have been an unwarranted criticism. It could be that you were insensitive to their personal circumstances. You just ignored what was going on in their life. It may be that you started initiatives and never followed them through. And so they say, hey, it's just his latest idea. He never does anything, follows through on them anyway. I don't trust him. But they won't say that. Trust can also be destroyed when there's a failure in integrity. And I would venture to say that everybody in this room could identify at least one person that you know who's had a moral failure that resulted in the loss of trust. And there's a lot of high profile ones out there. You got Jerry Falwell Jr. that took over after his father. Next thing you know, there's this moral failure, his integrity issue. He's no longer in that position. You got, not long ago, a guy named Ravi Zacharias, great apologist. I remember Jeff Vines, one of my friends out in California. Ravi Zacharias was his hero. And then he had this incident, these things that came out about him and his life. And I thought, I haven't had a chance to talk to Jeff about that since then, but I can just imagine how that was devastating to him, how sad that would have been. You got Bill Hybels. Here's Bill Hybels, and people used to go to those seminars and they'd have the video broadcasts and things like that. And he was writing all these books. And next thing you know, there's this moral issue comes up. And now, where's Bill Hybels? Steve Carter was in line to take over that church at Willow Creek. Steve was a graduate of Hope International University, just a really gracious, godly man. And even at that point, he said, I can't serve here. Steve was a gifted communicator, great leader. But he didn't do anything wrong, but he was associated with the head guy who did. And he said, I need to leave. So when you have these issues of integrity, it destroys trust. And when that's destroyed, it can take a long time to rebuild. And in some cases, you may never get it back in that institution or organization. So I'm not saying any of us are perfect. And I really appreciate what David shared about forgiveness and going to God. And there may be times when you have failed in some way and you need to go before a congregation. I mean, it's just almost like every time you turn around, you're reading about some pastor somewhere that did something wrong, and he's going to the elders and they're saying, okay, we're going to let this person have a restoration time, and they're taking time off for a year and these things, or whatever may happen. And a lot of times you can be restored, but sometimes you can't. So one of the soft skills of leadership is integrity that establishes trust. People just need to know that you're the same person. When you're alone with God, that's what your character is all about. And they want to see that's who you really are at the same time. The next soft skill is humility that lifts others up. Philippians 2:7 says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. There's a field of study in psychology called humility research. Psychologists can study anything, I guess. And so somebody liked to study humility, and they even wrote a handbook of humility. But you need to understand humility, not on an intellectual level, but on a personal and emotional level. It's reflected in your demeanor, in your conversation, in your actions, and the way you treat everyone. It's what I call your offstage presence. It's not something that you do to impress somebody else, but where you put up this facade of caring. But I will have to admit, I've been disappointed when there are some individuals I've met over the years whom I thought, when I saw them on the stage up in front of people, were just, man, really gracious, godly individuals. But when I got to know them, I found they had this mega ego. And they were publicly humble and privately egotistical and arrogant. So it was their stage presence that they looked humility, like they had humility. And I'm not saying that humility is what you beat yourself up and it's a lack of self-esteem and low self-worth. That's not humility. It's an awareness of spiritual modesty that recognizes the importance of other people above yourself. And obviously we have no better example of that than what Jesus did. You know, we talked about David seeing Jesus, or the person said, I saw Jesus, come wash my feet. Well, that's genuine humility. It's not just something you put up in front of others. I had Wayne Cordero speak to some college. Wayne wrote the book called Leading on Empty. And if you're ever in danger of burning out, you got to read that book. If you haven't read it yet, you'll read it someday. Leading on Empty. And Wayne spoke to some college presidents, and he was sharing about his son coming into work for him at his churches back there in Hawaii. And you know what the first job he gave his son was? Cleaning the restrooms. Because he wanted him to realize there's no job beneath you. It didn't like, you know, there's a lot of pastors today that I've seen who are senior pastors, and they have a son or daughter that's gifted, and they add them to the staff, but they don't start them at the bottom usually. They start them at a higher position. And what Wayne wanted to do was he wanted his son to understand that you are a servant leader, and you should never think that you're too good to do any job around here, whether it's picking up the trash. I remember one time when I was working at HIU, I'd always pick up trash on the campus. And I had no idea this had happened, but one day this guy was using me as a sermon illustration because he said, here's the president of Hope International picking up trash on the campus. I didn't just do that at HIU. I've done that my whole career. I picked up trash back at Milligan years and years ago. And it's not like you're doing that to impress somebody. It's just because you said, hey, this is what needs to be done, and I'm going to do it. I'm not going to expect somebody else to do something that I can't do. And that's what I'm talking about. And the risk we run is being in the spotlight can be intoxicating. And if you're up in front as a worship leader or a pastor or something like that, people will begin to kind of, I won't say they idolize you, but they have a type of respect for you that makes you feel kind of good. You know, it can be flattering. Somebody walks up, man, that sermon really helped me. You have been a tremendous blessing to me. And they give you special gifts, and they write special notes to you, and they send you emails about what a great message it was. And pretty soon you can start believing that, I guess I am pretty good. And you lose that humility. You lose that common ground. So, you know, we want to be achievers. We want to accomplish this. Now, if that's never happened to you, so don't feel bad. Maybe it will one of these days. So, but we all want to be achievers. And if that's one of your strengths, man, you're one of these driven people that says, I want to accomplish as much as I can, as fast as I can, and that's a good thing. But it really takes humility to invest in others. And it's especially when you're following somebody else and you say, wow, those are going to be some tough shoes to fill. It's really not hard to follow somebody who struggled and floundered, and you can come in and turn things around. But when your predecessor was really successful, there may be this little bit of jealousy in the back of your mind where you start saying, you know, I need to kind of find some flaws, some things they didn't do quite as well, because you have a trouble with humility. And the same thing can happen when you have a successor. I remember, Wayne Smith, when he was living, had talked about how when he retired at Southland and Mike Breaux came in and the church started growing, he said, if I'd have known that was going to happen, I wouldn't have left. So he was just joking, obviously. But Dave Stone even shared how when he passed the baton off to Kyle Eidelman at Southeast, that he said there was one day and Kyle was doing these things and it was really successful. And he said, I've got to admit, I felt a little jealous. And so humility lets you celebrate the success of your predecessor and set your successor up for success. And you can celebrate that with that person as well. So it's going to happen. Someday you're going to leave your position. And if the person who follows you does a better job and the church grows faster and more than it ever did under your leadership, praise God. But that's easier said than done. Sometimes we just think, how come it didn't happen when I was there? And this is where humility is, I think, critical. The next one is appreciation that communicates value. There's a book called The Five Languages. There was one called The Five Love Languages. Well, there's also 5 languages of appreciation. And there's a statement in that book that says, in our work with church staff members, we consistently find a deep hunger for appreciation. When appreciation is not forthcoming, they often become discouraged. And here's the kicker. We sadly found churches and ministries to be missing the mark in their efforts to show appreciation. I don't know why that's the case. You would think if there was ever a place that you could be appreciated, it would be in the body of Christ, in the church. But unfortunately, we get so wrapped up in accomplishing our goals and things that we forget to express appreciation to the people who are helping make it happen. So there are different ways you can express appreciation, and there's a little test called the Motivating by Appreciation Inventory. And you can do it. You can take that, buy that book, and it tells you how to get on site to do that on the internet. But I was in one organization one time, and the people there were just desperate to hear some words of appreciation from the leader. But the leader was so self-absorbed and involved in things and so preoccupied that he never took time to tell people how much he appreciated what they were doing. And that can be demoralizing and discouraging. People find appreciation in a lot of different ways. The book will point out that you can, sometimes it's just simply words of affirmation in front of their peers. It could be at a staff meeting. It could be in front of the church, where you acknowledge somebody that say, this person, we just really want to appreciate what they did, and be specific about it. It could be, sometimes it's quality time. When the leader sits down with an individual and says, hey, let's just go for coffee, just the two of us. My son's an elder at Compass Christian Church over here, and really proud of him. He's a great young man, not young, he's getting his 40s now, it's still young to me, but one of the things he does as an elder is he will pick different people, and they've got several multi-sites that Compass does. He takes a staff member out for lunch, just on his own, just goes out and has dinner with them or lunch or what like, and just says, how you doing? And expresses appreciation as an elder. He's not the pastor of the church. He's just an elder. And that's what he does. But it's those little things that let somebody know, hey, I'm valued around here. Somebody has seen what I'm doing. Others find that it's an act of service where you do something for somebody else. Say, hey, let me do that for you. Let me take care of that. Sometimes it's a tangible gift, a gift card, something small. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to be a $500 bonus. It can just be something small of recognition. And sometimes people just simply want a physical touch, a pat on the back, a handshake that's genuinely done in sincere appreciation. So it's kind of like, have you ever made a donation to a nonprofit organization or a church or a college and not get a thank you letter? And I did that a while back. I made a pretty sizable gift to an organization, and it was never acknowledged. And I hope you do that. I hope you take it upon yourself to say, okay, when somebody makes a gift or something, I don't have to put their name up somewhere. but I want them to know that I appreciated it. And it's more than just a receipt. Sometimes it's a personal word to say, thanks for helping us get that job done, something like that. But when you look around at your organization, say, well, who usually gets the praise? You know, it's kind of like nobody ever affirms the custodial staff that cleans up after the event. It's always somebody else that usually is up in front doing something that gets the praise and recognition and appreciation. Another soft skill is a work ethic that reflects appropriate priorities. It's not uncommon today to have as many as 5 generations working together. And every generation has their own idea of a work ethic, and it often was ingrained in when they grew up. So when I was a kid, from the time I was little, I was working. I mean, I mowed yards. When I was in high school or junior high and high school, I had a paper route. I would get up at 5:30 in the morning, 7 days a week. And we had a paper every day except Christmas. And I delivered papers in our little town on my bicycle. And my grandfather was a farmer. He got up at 5:30 every morning and went out and fed the cows and stuff like that. My dad was a coal miner. He went to work every day. He had 2 weeks vacation a year. Worked 50 weeks, 6 days a week. So ingrained in me was this work ethic that says, this is what you do when you do your job. You show up on time, you work hard, you don't complain, you just get it done. And then I started hiring millennials. And I'm not kidding you. I've hired some young adults today who would say, I'll come to work at this time, but I'm going home at this time because that's what you're paying me for. And don't expect me to work overtime. And I want to be a director within a couple of years. And I have literally, honestly had young people I've hired who were in their 20s and 30s quit because they didn't get advanced as fast as they thought they should. So you're dealing with this vast array of work ethics on both extremes. Today, they have what they call the silent quitters, the people that are still going to job, but they're just not putting their heart into it. So a work ethic is a soft skill that helps you reflect a priority. It's when you're reliable and dependable. It's when you are productive. You start what you finish, you stick with it, you manage your time wisely, you stay organized. It's where you take ownership and accept responsibility for what the job is and say, the quality of my work reflects who I am, and I'm not going to cut corners. It's collaboration where you do it with the right attitude, with the right values, with a positive demeanor. This is a work ethic. And I don't care what generation you're from. A work ethic is a soft skill that's going to help you succeed as a leader. And so the point is, I think it's a matter of personal stewardship and taking care of things that God has entrusted to you. So wherever I have worked, whatever I've been involved with, I felt like we had to have a standard of excellence. I've told Phil, the church here looks great. And he was sharing with us how when he came to here, they had carpet that had been on here. How many years had the carpet been here, Phil? Carpet been here for 35 years. I remember when Gene Apple came to Eastside Christian Church, where my wife and I attended in California, that Eastside had gotten kind of run down. I mean, it was looking pretty tired and pretty rough. And one of the first things Gene did when he came into that church was, man, they fixed things up and did some fresh paint and carpet and fixed stuff up. And because he took pride in what they did. Well, that's a work ethic. It says, I value what we're doing here. And finally, last one here of the 5 soft skills that I came up with is self-awareness that leads to growth. As leaders, we want to be lifelong learners, and we want to be constantly doing what we can to improve ourselves. We never settle. I think there's always something else I can do a little bit better, some other way that I can improve. And your being here is evidence that you are one of those people. You say, hey, look, I want to get better. But self-awareness means I've got to know something about myself. I remember the first time that I hired a guy, and he was quite a bit older than me. And he said, "What are your hot buttons?" I said, "What do you mean? What are my hot buttons?" He said, "What is it that really sets you off?" He said, "I want to get to know you better." And it made me start thinking about what is it that really bugs me. And so, we've all got them. We just haven't thought about them. We haven't said, "Oh, maybe that is my hot button." So it's knowing who you are and how you're perceived by others can help you become a more effective leader. And we all have blind spots that we can improve. So one of the things that you can do is, if you heard of the Enneagram, Enneagram. I don't know if you've done that or not. I won't ask you to put your hand up or something like that, because I hate it when people do that stuff. But I'd go online and look up the Enneagram. And there's a little test that you can give in there. I think it costs about $19 or something like that. Takes a while to do it, but you get back this report about who you are. And I read it to my wife. First I read it, I thought, gee, I guess that really is what I'm like. It does a pretty good job of identifying your superpowers and the things you got to watch out for. So my 3 superpowers were perfectionism, self-discipline, and self-improvement. But they've also got a flip side. So that's great that you're a perfectionist, but here's what that can do to you. And here's what happens. And it's great that you've got self-discipline, but watch out for this. So I think a good leader is self-aware, and those things can make you a little bit uncomfortable. So let me wrap it up here. This is a statement from some research that was done over 100 years ago. Harvard University, the Carnegie Foundation, and Stanford Research Center concluded that 85% of job success comes from having well-developed soft skills, and only 15% from technical skills and knowledge. Now, that doesn't mean you don't have responsibility to learn as much as you can about what you're doing, but it's saying, if you blow it on the soft skills, you may have a pretty serious problem here. And I think that level 5 leaders, last statement here, build on a foundation of soft skills that provide stability during stressful times and increases the effectiveness of their team. So I hope you'll give attention to soft skills. And so let me pray for you guys as we close here. Father, I just want to take a moment to say thank you for these men and women in this room who have committed themselves to becoming better leaders. I know that the impact they will have on their churches and their ministries and their families and communities is going to be significant. And I appreciate the fact that they've made sacrifices to become a part of a movement to plant churches and to grow churches to reach men and women for your kingdom. I ask your blessing upon them. I ask that you truly help them to look within themselves and to consider, what am I like? And what are my blind spots? And how can I improve my soft skills? But we want to do it, Lord, not because we want to be honored and glorified, but because we want to build up your kingdom and make your son, Jesus, the focus of all that we do. We pray this in his name. Amen.
Real quick, guys, before we head to lunch, they're finished setting stuff up for lunch. David, could you actually go back to the list of soft skills that he had there? The five things. Yeah, just leave it right there. If you guys would, just for a couple minutes, share at your tables the one area on here that you maybe need to have to focus on personally. So just kind of pick one and maybe share which one stands out to you, and just kind of talk at your tables for just a couple minutes. All right, guys, they are ready for us. We got some Christian chicken for you. We got Chick-fil-A ready for some good, the Lord's chicken from what a lot of people talk about. Anyway, real quick, we have another sponsor for us this week. Dallas Christian College, several reps and students as well are here with us. So if you guys would, we'll hear from them in just a second, but they've provided lunch for us. So can we say thank you to them real quick? Yay! Since you chose to sit in the front row, I'm gonna have Mr. Brian here pray for us. But if we can quickly grab lunch and come back and sit down, we'll hear from our sponsor.
Father, thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity to be here and to learn and to be humbled and Father, just being brought before your presence. And we just thank you so much for everything that has been poured out before us. Father, we just thank you for chicken. Thank you for what we're about to eat. And thank you that you bless us in so many different ways. Father, may we give you the praise throughout this day. In Jesus' name, amen.
but he'll want to do that first.
To start out.
Yeah, where did he go?
I can go talk to him.
Yeah, yeah. I'll just jump up after you run that.
Okay.